Hello and welcome back to another reaction video. First off, I am so sorry that I missed my normal upload for the Extra History series yesterday. We've been having some weird issues with our internet. Basically, didn't have internet all weekend, so I couldn't record and set to upload. And I'm back to work for the school year, so no luck there either. But we're going to dive directly into it today. We're taking a look at the third episode of the Incan Empire series, this time the life of a dead emperor. And if I remember correctly, we're taking a look at the reality that the Inca worshipped and revered the dead as if they were still here. And so a lot of people would go to visit the mummified bodies of former leadership.
Cusco. Tupa Inca Yupanqui has come to visit his father, Pachacuti, for dinner. Tupa Inca sits in his father's house, drinking his chicha beer and partaking of food.
Okay.
They talk about the old times, about the state of the empire, and share tobacco. Halfway through, they get up to relieve themselves before settling in for a second round. Finally, Tupa Inca begs his leave. The hour has grown late. He tells his father they must meet again, this time at Tupa Inca's residence. Perhaps his father will visit him at his estate in the mountains. It's a perfectly normal visit between father and son. You know, except for one.
Except his father is dead. I feel like that's the twist that they're about to give us, which makes sense with some of the way that they reacted and interacted with the deceased.
I mean, small thing. Both men are dead.
Oh! Never mind, the twist a little bit further than I expected. Yeah, that actually caught me off guard. Okay.
Yeah, they have been for decades. These are mummies, still fulfilling social obligations as they did in life. And this was a dinner party for the dead.
Very cool. I did not expect that twist. That is really neat, though.
We're in a strange place in the century-long history of the Inca Empire.
Alright. I'm about to just buy YouTube Premium so that I don't have to...
From a few territorial gains, most of its establishment and expansion has already occurred. The current...
Yeah, at this point where we were talking about, and this kind of is where the second episode ended, is the solidification of the empire and what it's going to be more or less until the arrival of the Spanish and the apocalypse that occurs when they arrive. We'll discuss that in another episode, I know, but that's going to be the big deal.
Sapa Inca, Huayna Capac, rules the empire at the height of its power. But Huayna Capac will be the last uncontested emperor of the Inca.
And that is a major problem. And that would explain why this is the height. This is the furthest extent, the highest power that a leader has. Because once that you start having all these challengers to the throne, all these individuals who are vying for that position, you don't have the stable structure that's necessary for further expansion or even really further upward mobility within the same empire.
Yet before we discuss its fall, let's take a moment and examine the empire at its height, how it operated, and what life was like.
Some of the more
because
social aspects.
This is one of the most unique societies in history, and it's worth dropping in on a day in the life of the Inca Empire. So, our day begins not in the capital of Cusco.
I still love the fact, and I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, I love the fact that as they're showing off Cusco, they're not just showing off the walled city on top, but they're showing the terraces along the side of the mountain. Because of the fact that this is a mountain society, a empire literally built out of the Andes range, they've got terraces as their main form of agriculture. Meaning that they are literally cutting chunks out of the mountain to build basically massive steps going down along the side of the mountain. This is why you get idiots out there who turn around and go, look, they're giant steps. They're not. They're terraces for farming. But I love the fact that they show that the mountaintop that Cusco is sitting on is terraced, because that's what a lot of the area around major cities would have looked like, considering the fact that they have to provide enough food to feed everyone inside. Right? So I do really like that.
But in the conquered city of Quito in modern Ecuador. And it's
Quito, by the way, I believe is the actual Incan city. I doubt it still exists. I'm assuming that it probably went the same way as like Tenochtitlan or Cusco or Lima, where they are effectively torn down by the Spanish and then rebuilt in a Spanish structure using the old Incan brickworks and materials. But Quito, I believe, is the capital of Ecuador today.
starts with a party. Thousands of people crowd the plaza, laughing, eating, drinking chicha beer, and staring at the Incas who have just thrown this lavish feast. Because this is no ordinary party. It's the feast before the labor tithe.
Now, I believe the labor tithe is, and I know that they're about to explain it, but I'm just kind of going off of a guess here, is the period in which people have to go do a certain amount of work for the government, for the empire itself. A lot of different empires have had this, especially before modern taxation systems. Modern day income tax is a relatively new reality. And one of the easier ways to track and keep up with making sure that people are paying into the empire and helping it grow is through a labor tithe or a labor tax, where they have to go and do a certain amount of work. A lot of major construction projects in China throughout the centuries came from labor tithes. It's a fairly popular method throughout a lot of time.
Among the crowd sits one man, not an Inca, but a local of Quito. He's a father, a husband, a brother, and an artisan. But to the Inca, he is a not. See, a few years ago, he married, which to the Inca makes him both a full person and a part of the imperial labor pool. The Inca's worldview is based on complementary pairs, man and woman, sun and moon, one who breaks ground, and one who sows seeds. And this means someone is not a member of society until they form a household. Not to mention, a married man can leave his home for months at a time, doing labor service, while his wife cares for his home and fields. The year before,
I do like that idea, I see where the necessity or the kind of structural idea behind that societal structure is, because you don't want to pull somebody away from their home if their home is going to become ramshackle and falling apart by the time that he gets back. They need somebody to take care of and maintain the structure so that the person doesn't get pulled away from the tithe, and then their livelihood back home disappears while they're gone. So I get the kind of reason why that social structure develops. It's interesting, though. And you'll see at the bottom here, it says the census, which a lot of empires and a lot of civilizations throughout time have had censuses to know what their labor pool looks like, to know what their tax base looks like, to know what their population looks like, so that they can use that to inform decision-making and structures.
Census taker had come to the man's valley, recording on a knotwork quipu how many households existed and what each person did. In the empire, people are sorted by age, sex, and the kind of work they can perform. He counted elderly men who couldn't.
I love the fact that they put the ESRB rating for the age.
Walk, separate from those who could. He listed little boys as young as 4 as trap setters, and their sisters as gatherers. He counted women old enough to carry burdens, and others who were physically or mentally disabled. Though the man farms most of the year, due to the Inca's insistence that all households must be self-sufficient in food production, his people are particularly talented goldsmiths, and that's likely what he and 9 other households in his group will do for the empire. Because the empire works in base 10. The goldsmith is counted as one of 10 households of goldsmiths that report to a local leader. And that leader, along with 9 others, report to a man who's in charge of marshaling those 100 households.
Fascinating. That's a really cool system. That's a neat idea. Yeah. And it makes it simple in the manner in which it gets structured.
And it goes on like that up to groups of 10,000. Each has its own leader, most of them local, that report to the Inca representatives who live in Quito or the way stations on the Inca Road.
Turning our
That is really neat, though. I think I'm misremembering, but that same base 10 structure has been used for a lot of different regions throughout history. I believe that same base 10 structure is the basis of a lot of the uh, Roman military structures as it's going out on campaign. And so I find that very interesting that that works out.
Thus can 100,000 Inca, mostly living in Cusco.
I just realized I have been absolutely burying these words. I sound like I need a thesaurus. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of lost in where I'm at today. Hey, I am having a fantastic time checking this out, but just I guess I'm thrown off a little bit given how long it's been since I actually made a video. Sorry about that.
Cusco rule over 10 million people, but not always easily. This feasting masks attention.
Not.
Quito is a new addition to the Inca Empire, and though the man can see some benefits, such as having more food than his ancestors did, and the empire had improved security by stopping regional warfare, locals don't like the imposed sun god worship, resent the labor tax, and still feel the effects of the forced relocations. When the Inca came, they divided the land and llama herds into 3 parts, taking one for the Inca aristocracy, one for their priests, and finally gifting that last third to the locals for sustenance. When the crops failed, people went hungry. An Inca official steps up, calling for silence. He reads...
And we discussed that before. No, I'm sorry, I'm misremembering. I'm thinking about the mines that we recently were reviewing. But the reality that goes with that, to feeding 10 million, and the idea of it having to be self-sufficient across the board, creates a separate issue. Because if every family is making just enough to keep itself running, then when crop failures happen, you don't have the surplus to supply with the different regions. Not to mention the fact that if you have massive stores in, say, Cusco, that is hundreds, maybe 1,000 miles. I don't think it's that far. But it's at least hundreds of miles between Cusco and Quito. So if there is a famine in Quito, it is incredibly difficult to get enough food from the stores in Cusco north to Quito.
out the assignments. A division of stonemasons will repair the stretch of road between 2 peaks. Another will fix the emperor's local terraces. The weavers, the Inca's most prized and privileged artisans, will make clothing for the Inca aristocrats. The potters, the least prized, will manufacture bowls and pots. Some will be assigned military service. And for the man and his goldsmiths, he will make gold and silver ritual objects destined for Cusco. The man and his group take the Inca Road to a nearby way station that includes storehouses, workshops, and temporary housing. And Inca officials issue him the materials he needs, as well as a portion of food to sustain him through the crafting of the 3 golden llamas he now owes the Inca rulers. The sooner he finishes this task, the sooner he can return home. But he knows the Inca covet fine objects, so he takes his time and does it right. When he's done, he hands the objects over to a courier and makes his way home. This courier is doing his service as well, running parcels up and down the Inca Road, but he only runs one segment, from a single way station to another, before he hands the llama off to another runner who takes the next leg.
So before we actually continue with this, a few things. First off, couriers, this makes perfect sense. This is how most trade was done in the ancient world. It was very, very rare for a merchant to go from one spot and go all the way to the end of a trade route. Usually, I am so sorry. I hope that did not create a massive feedback. I don't know what happened. I just whacked the mic heavy. But couriers or shorter distance runners were much more common. And because of the fact that you had that shorter distance to go, they tended to be able to cover more miles in a singular day. Because if you told a singular individual to go, say, 100 kilometers, that would take them a pretty decently long time. But if you had them run 10 miles, hand it off, then give a fresh runner the same package and tell them to run 10 miles, eventually you're going to shave down that delivery time by a fair amount by the time that it actually reaches its final destination. Not just that, but these storehouses could have multiple couriers, and once that they are at that other location, they can remain, recover, and then run a new item back to the other way station. And as a result, you've got a very convenient, very well-structured setup. Meanwhile, if you're wondering why golden llamas, why are the llama herds so important? It's because llamas are the only beast of burden that exists in South America. There's nothing really else. And even then, llamas are not great beasts of burden. They are temperamental. They are not prone to doing what they're told. They're stubborn. But they are still incredibly important. And the fur that they produce can be used by those weavers to make fine garments. Same with alpacas. So they are an incredibly important part of the Andean culture.
During his service, this teenage boy has carried quipu messages, precious small objects, and even a fish caught fresh off the coast, destined for the emperor's plate in Cusco. Through this system, an object can make it from Quito to Cusco in 3 days, a distance of over 1,000 miles.
I was wrong. I was wrong. I said that I didn't think it was over 1,000. It is over 1,000. But yeah, that's crazy. And this is where I go back to that earlier discussion with food specifically, because enough people to be able to run enough to prevent starvation, that causes many more logistical issues. Because there's a difference between a fish getting salted and then rushed in 3 days to be fed to the emperor, compared to hundreds of pounds of potato being able to be traveled across the same distance. But that's insane. 1,000 miles in 3 days. And it's probably because of the fact that it doesn't actually stop. It just keeps moving because you get it from one spot to the next, and then it turns around and gets moved immediately by a new courier.
One of these golden llamas is destined to be united with a teenage girl. A very special teenage girl, whose father has volunteered her for a great honor, to be sacrificed. Human sacrifice is common in the Empire, but generally on a small scale. And this girl, now traveling the road dressed in fine garments and carried on a litter, is not afraid.
And sadly, that's kind of a reality. There's a lot of different religions throughout history that practice human sacrifice. And it's not pretty, it's not easy, it's not good. But yeah, it's kind of a reality for a lot of different ancient empires and a lot of different ancient religions.
She and the teenage boy she's paired with will spend their final year in luxury. Her family will be rewarded. And after a year, the two will marry and go to a ceremony in the mountains. There, they'll drink chicha until they pass out, whereupon they'll be strangled, bludgeoned, and buried as an offering to the sun and moon. They will be a complementary pair as the sun and moon are, and they will be buried with the little llama and other gold and silver offerings. Gold the sweat of the sun, and silver.
Now, if you're wondering why those, it's not just the reality that they match it more or less color-wise. It's the reality that those are two very, I don't want to say common. They're so rare. There's a reason why they're so valuable in a lot of regions. But the Andes have a lot of gold and silver deposits. that can be extracted. It's the reason why Spain eventually becomes so insanely wealthy after conquering the region, is because of the vast silver deposits.
Moon. She does not fear this fate, however, for death is not an ending, but merely a transition to another phase. The dead are always with the Inca. She has herself poured chicha into the grave of her grandmother.
Which, that also makes sense. And the idea of human sacrifice becomes more palatable to an individual who's going for it when they think that they are immediately going to be joining a ever-present afterlife. Basically, the idea that human life is just a stepping stone to something further. I think it would make people feel like it's less scary. Everybody has their own religion's beliefs. We're not going to dive into that any further, but it does make a fair bit of logical sense why someone would believe that it is going to be okay for this to happen.
And this lesson is reinforced when they pass a royal procession going the opposite way, carrying the mummy of Pachacuti on his way to his son's mountain estate. Now, the dead emperor has a surprisingly active social life. He eats and drinks, his attendants pouring chicha into a channel in the earth. A man urinates on his behalf. He appears at religious ceremonies at the solstice, and spirit mediums make his will known when the emperor and other officials consult his wisdom. And he retains all his property. His attendants are in fact his descendants. When an Inca ruler dies, his entrails are removed and burned, the ashes joining those of his ancestors in a hollow golden statue in the Golden Courtyard.
All right, so the internal organs of all of the major leaders are being coalesced into a single artifact, which is interesting. We've discussed this previously when we talked about Russage's Anubis rap, that the Egyptians, when they did mummification, stored the innards in canopic jars that went into the tombs.
His body is freeze-dried in the Andean air. And
very dry, very cold in the higher elevations, which makes sense.
Much like his body, his power divides as well. His political power goes to his successor, a son chosen by his primary wife. And his primary wife, also his full or half-sister, an arrangement that prevents too many claimants, will become the most influential person in the empire when their son takes the throne. The emperor, on the other hand, chooses a son to run his affairs when he transitions to death. That son and his line will inherit all of the emperor's wealth and estates. Or rather, they will control and run all the wealth on behalf of the deceased emperor, who will continue going about his life. After all, death is not an ending. Pachacuti's spirit is still alive, vital, and powerful in his mummy and in the sacred landscape. So, his attendants carry him to the mountain estate, which he engineered to complement the beautiful landscape, and on to visit his son. But if Pachacuti's spirit exists, it may be troubled. Things in the empire are not quite working well. His grandson is finding the labor system cumbersome. And because all the royal lands are owned by mummies, he's building Quito into a second capital and pushing out the borders, just to get some land for himself. And when...
Which makes sense. You only have so many generations of leadership before you've effectively taken up all of the valuable territory. And suddenly, the new rulers have effectively nothing, which is a crazy thought process.
Pachacuti last saw him, Huayna Capac asked for his advice on a strange phenomena. Pale men, wearing clothing of metal, had appeared on the coast in ships, and it was said that they had brought sickness with them. Back in Quito, the goldsmith felt a pain in his back. Had that courier looked pale and a little more tired than he should? Strange small marks start appearing on the goldsmith's skin.
Smallpox.
Some kind of pox. And with such small things, do empires fall?
Yeah, and we'll take a look at that next time. I've referred to it as that before, but the arrival of the Spanish and the disease that they bring with them, smallpox, bubonic plague, typhoid, yellow fever. Yellow fever, I think, develops later. But all of these different diseases, all stacked on top of each other, are effectively an apocalypse in and of themselves. All those things stacking together, they're already deadly on their own. But when they're all hitting at once, it is insanely destructive. And this is before you think about the fighting, the violence that's going to happen, the horrific encomienda system that is going to be used to force labor and slavery out of the Incan and native peoples throughout Central and South America. It is brutal, and it might as well feel like an apocalypse for the people that go through it. We will check out the next episode next Monday. I should be back on my regular schedule. I'll probably still do 2 more videos this week, but they'll probably come out on Wednesday or Thursday and Saturday, since this one's going to come out on Tuesday. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Let me know what I should be checking out soon, what else I should be watching, and give me some other ideas on how to kind of grow the channel. We've kind of stagnated on views and dipped back down. I'm kind of curious if anybody has any ideas on where to go from here. I feel like I know some of them. I could definitely get a lot of views doing like an oversimplified or ERB, but I've seen all those and I want to be able to give a natural and real reaction to them. So I want to try to avoid them for right now. Have a great day. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.